So we're now going to ask Chris a few questions, have a conversation. Got questions submitted by a number of the members of WSWA. I have them here. You have not seen these questions.
They've been kept in a Funk and Wagnall jar.
There you go. There you go. And I did not share them with Donna Brazil, so I'm sure they haven't been leaked out. So the first thing that we wanted to ask you, so you actually have something in common with a lot of the WSWA members. They enter a family business following a parent or grandfather, and you did the same sort of thing, a very famous father, obviously. So how did you handle your entry into the business? How did it affect your ability to gain your own persona, your own credibility in the industry? How did you handle that?
Well, the one big difference is, yes, I did follow my father. I'm sure all of you know my dad was Mike Wallace. I'm very proud of him. Unfortunately, he didn't own the business, so I had to find somebody to work for. You know, it helped, but not in the ways that most people think. Yes, I met people, and I probably got my first job because of that. But in my business, like all of yours, even if you've inherited it, you know, it's what you've done for people lately. It's whether you've succeeded on your own, and you're not going to stay in business very long. And particularly in the TV news business, working for various stations and then networks, you got to produce all the time. I would say the biggest advantage was just learning by example, learning levels of preparation, of professionalism, ways of operating, to watch my father prepare for an interview. And one of the things that I know he always said, look, when you interview somebody, I'm interviewing the Secretary of State, they obviously know more about foreign policy than I do, but I know the questions I'm going to ask, and if I really do research in depth on the subjects I'm going to discuss with the Secretary or the President or the Senator or the King, and I've done it all, you can make it clear to them pretty soon, pretty early on, they can't spin you because you know too much. And then there's a greater likelihood they'll come clean and be candid with you.
Do you think reporters nowadays do enough research before they interview people? Do you think there's the same type of preparation that you do today? Or is there just a superficial kind of preparation? Or there's not enough time given what goes on in the 24-hour media cycle?
Well, time is certainly a problem. When I covered the White House, and I covered Ronald Reagan for 6 years in the 80s, I had to worry about one show in a 24-hour cycle, the NBC Nightly News. There was a separate reporter to do the Today Show, so I'd do my piece. I look at these reporters now on cable, and they're having to report every hour. So all you're doing is broadcasting. You have no time to think. You have very little time to call sources and build information. But when you're doing a big interview, yeah, you have time to prepare. I think I'm particularly neurotic about it, so I think I prepare more than most. But I will say this, that I have a friend who's a federal judge, and one time I was saying, you know, I over-prepare, and he very quickly said there's no such thing, meaning that there's no such thing as over-preparing, it's just preparing. So that's kind of my attitude towards it.
So obviously there's a lot of talk today about balkanization and the divide in this country. And the question I have for you is that more of a perception because of the intense social media, the 24-hour news cycle today? Do you think that it's any worse today than it was, let's say, 25 years during Reagan's administration or during the Clinton administration? Is it any worse today, or is social media accentuating that or making it more visible?
No, it's clearly worse. I mean, the fact is, you look back at the Reagan years, and they got things done. They legislated, and you not only, the parties would generally stick together. The Democrats under Reagan, Tip O'Neill was the speaker, and they would stay together. But in Reagan's case, he had the unified Republican Party, and then he would go to the country and give a speech and get support. People would call into their legislators, and he would get some conservative Democrats. They were called the boll weevils back then, and it would be enough to put him over the top. You know, to look at what's going on right now with Trump, and it was Obamacare repeal and replace, but I'll tell you folks, I think it's true about tax reform too. I don't see that they're going to be able to legislate. I mean, not only is there this just absolute, nobody even thinks the Democrats are going to go for any Trump initiative, And so he doesn't even go for them, doesn't even try for them, which is very different from Reagan. But there now is this balkanization, if you will, this divide inside the Republican Party. So after 7 years of campaigning on repeal and replace, they couldn't even get a 218, a bare majority of Republicans, and they could lose 20. They couldn't even get a bare majority of Republicans to support repeal and replace. It is divided, and I think there are a lot of things that have to do with it. I think the gerrymandering of the districts so that they're safe districts. In a lot of the districts, the Republican congressman ran ahead of Donald Trump, so they're not as scared of him at all. They don't, if he threatens to go in their district, they say, hey, I'm more popular in my district than you are. And social media and interest groups and the internet. It's all messed up, and I just wonder whether we're capable of addressing our problems anymore.
Do you think that the tactics taken by the Democrats, for instance, the Gorsuch nomination in unified opposition, regardless of the issue, is going to work to their benefit, or it's going to work to their detriment in the next election cycle?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to work to their benefit. I think that, again, the country is so divided, and frankly, Trump is such a polarized figure, and you can see this in the town hall meetings they're having when they go back to their districts on recess, which they're on right now, that I don't think there's any, I'm not talking about the good of the country, I'm talking about the good of that particular candidate running for election in 2018. I'm not sure that there's any percentage in trying to do something and work across the aisle. Just as with the Republicans, the only danger you have in a solid Republican district is if you compromise and move a little to the center, you're going to get a primary opponent who is further to your right. Well, for the Democrat, if you compromise and go along with Trump and the Republicans on something, you're going to get a primary opponent who's further to your left. So, no, I have to say I'm pretty pessimistic about it.
In today's world, in all business of all types, we talk about disruptors, right? In the taxi world, it's Uber. Right, you have the disruption all across the new economy and the technology. Is Trump the disruptor of the media? Is he your disruptor in terms of his ability to use social media to go around the media and change the dynamic of the political world to the media?
Well, yes and no. He's certainly has his own path in a way that no president, no politician has ever had. I did a power player, for those of you who know the show, we do profiles at the end of the show, and I did one on a fellow named Dan Scavino, who none of you have heard of, but you've all known his work. Dan Scavino is the social media czar for Donald Trump, and when I did a profile with him, I said, well, if he tweets something out, how many people does he reach? I'll ask you, how many people do you think he reaches?
I believe it was 20 to 30 million.
100 million people.
I'm way low.
Incidentally, I'm really glad you said 10 million rather than 150 million, because it would have blown the story. Nothing worse than when somebody overguesses. Because it's not just Twitter. It then gets aggregated out, accumulated out to Facebook, his personal post, the White House post. So, it gets out to 100 million people, and that's why he'd be crazy to stop it. I think he could stop some of what he sends, but I think he should use it more strategically. But having said that, our ratings are at an all-time high, so it's not like people are seeing what he says and then not watching us. So in that sense, you could say, yes, it's like Uber, and he's created a new market, but the taxi business has never been better.
Gotcha. So let me ask you a question. So WSWA represents American wholesalers, family-owned businesses. President Trump is big on American businesses. So how do you think we as an association, as an industry, can use that to our benefit in our dealings in Congress? Do you think it's a benefit to be in that position with this administration and this Congress in terms of our dealings on tax reform and things of that nature?
I think that anything where you can say that you're providing American jobs, and it's interesting, I would suspect you guys already know this, but this is a president who likes successes, and when CEOs of big industries or companies come in to meet with him, they like to have a goodie they can hand the president, so he'll tweet about it and brag about it and own it, if you will. I put that in quotes. So even if Ford, for instance, was planning to put $100 million into a plant or something, they will save that, or maybe they'll re-announce it when they're in the Oval Office or the Roosevelt Room with him, so he then can talk about it. And so anything that you can do where you can say to the president or to the White House we're creating jobs, we're doing something for America, that'll help. I was thinking as I was, this border adjustment tax, because a lot of the products that the wholesalers get is imported, correct?
Correct.
So that would not be good, would it, the border adjustment tax?
It depends if you're a domestic supplier or you're an international supplier, right?
But if you're an international supplier,
in this room, I'm sure you have differences of opinion all across the room right now.
I will tell you, though, I think for all the talk that tax reform is in real trouble, and interestingly enough, one of the reasons it's in trouble, and this gets back, is that Trump has refused to release his tax returns, and he's the first president who didn't do it just as a matter of course, his entire tax return since Jimmy Carter in the 1970s, and the Democrats are now holding that up, and it's not a stupid move on their part to say, hey, you want us to do tax reform? We need to see your tax return because we got to know if something we're going to pass would personally benefit you. And it's a good way for them to oppose them on a question of principle. So I think it's possible, in the end, it may be okay that you'll see a substantial tax cut, but in terms of a tax reform, and I think in a sense they might be willing to blow a bigger hole in the deficit to try to get tax cut through, but in terms of a revenue neutral tax reform, I think that's going to be pretty hard.
So, keeping deadlines, and this is sort of the last sort of issue. I was actually at the White House a couple weeks ago. The White House actually invited the business community in. We didn't receive an invitation for 8 years for under President Obama to come visit. And within weeks, of course, of him coming into office, we get the invitation to come visit. They tell me they're going to have their tax reform plan out within the next 2 weeks. You think we can rely on that deadline from the White House?
No. No, it's no, and it's funny because they first said it was going to come out in February and then March, and then Mnuchin said it was going to be done in August, and now they're saying, well, maybe this year. If I were a betting man, I would take the over on 2017.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and your comments.
Thank you.